Welcome to the Elite Podcast, where we discuss business, family, and life. Now, welcome to your hosts, Mr. H. Rod himself, Henry Rodriguez, and Ryan Arditty, the SCV MVP.
What's up, podcast world? It's your favorite insurance guy, Henry Rodriguez, and I'm here once again with my co-host.
It's your boy, the SCV MVP.
MVP. We got a good one, dude.
I'm excited.
Let's
really
dive,
excited.
Let's
a little
dive,
nervous. Kind of
always
excited.
a little
I
nervous,
know, but this
a little
one,
sweaty.
You know,
did you take your
big
energy
deal.
drink on this one? You're good? No more?
It's going
Last
still.
time it was a little suspect.
I'm going to start running right now.
Let's dive right into this thing. We have, you know what, I'm going to say board chair of the Michael Hoefflin Foundation. He also happens to be the assistant city manager of the city of Santa Clarita, Frank Oviedo. Thank you so much for coming, man.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk, you know what, because you guys just had a fantastic event, Voice, let's talk about the Michael Hoefflin event that you guys just had.
Wow, yeah. Saturday, 2 Saturdays ago now, we had a great event, the Cheers for Charity event, which thank you all, the both of you guys, for help being sponsors
All
of that.
four of us were actually part of it.
I participated.
Did you show up, though?
You know, I got vacation.
The common theme to these podcasts, did Ryan show up?
Corey, can you edit that, please?
Hey, at least you provided a check, which created a beautiful evening.
And beer.
Yeah.
And beer.
Check and
I
beer.
understand
Correct.
you sponsored one of the kegs.
That's sponsored one of the kegs. Yeah.
So it was the three
You're
of
welcome.
us were the cake sponsors, Frank, myself, and Ryan, and it. The kids' play area, which Frank, I believe that was your idea, turned out to be phenomenal because the parents actually were able to enjoy themselves and celebrate the evening, while the kids were just having a great time in there.
Yeah, we tried that for the first time this year, and I think it worked out well. We had 50-plus kids, so it allowed the families to go do their thing, listen to music, eat, have some drinks, and not have to worry about where their kids were at. So that's the one thing I think we did really well this year.
Sure
I
did.
agree.
Yeah. And I don't think we have final numbers yet, but I know we've raised a lot of money, and no one more deserving than these families that are going through probably one of the most horrific times in their lives, and happy to serve under you on the board.
Well, thanks for serving on the board. I know when we sat down for lunch the first time and talked about it, there was a lot of questions, but boy, you have backed up your play on every front. Boy, this is one of the hardest working guys I've worked with.
I sent you my best. I told you. You reached out, and I was like, I got the guy.
Yes.
I got the guy.
When the voice puts his mind to it, ain't no stopping him.
Can I give a shameless plug to somebody real quick, though? And I think you guys will back me on this one. My fiancée, Sonja, she crushed it.
Heck
Yes.
yeah.
Could you guys do you want to give a little shameless plug?
Absolutely. I'll tell you.
Sonja Gilheis, thank you for stepping up and helping these guys produce a dynamic event. Yes?
She made us look like rock stars. And last year was when I was introduced at that same event, Cheers for Charity, in 2023. And I think we came with a little bit new energy and were able to come together with Sonja to really create like a whole new vibe and feel. Not that take anything away from the first one, but this one it had some vibes to it that reminded me of the gala. Right, just a very special evening. You know, I'm going to bring it up every single time I have an opportunity.
We know who's chairing the gala committee.
I heard.
That seems like a cool committee, the gala committee.
Well, now that I have Sonia, right? Like, I feel as good as gold to do whatever we need to, you know.
And he just volunteered for. He's like, that sounds like a cool committee. He just
The gala.
I think you have your first volunteer.
Okay.
He's
You want to
chairing
start
the committee.
The chair or the board?
Are you gonna show up?
I'm always there.
Sonja did a great job.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Fully appreciate everything.
I sent you my best, Rick. I sent you my best.
She did a great job.
Where do you go from
we
here?
learned a few things from last year.
Sure did.
She capitalized on what we learned and then made it even better. And where do we go from here?
Yeah.
I think the sky's the limit, quite frankly. If we're lucky enough to have Sonja back and to do next year's, to help us with next year's, I think we're going to even see a better gala, or the better fundraiser for sure.
You know, as an attendee, I mean, yes, different vibe this year. I had a lot of fun. My children were there, felt safe with everything that was going on. It was an amazing family environment. It was just all around. Actually, one of the better events I've attended this year.
Yeah, I like we've kind of moved into this kind of family environment type fundraiser. It's a little bit of different twist. Often in the past it had been about dressing up, putting a suit and tie on, in some cases a tuxedo, get some babysitters for the kids, and then go out for the evening. We have so many young families out here. I just wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity that if you couldn't get a babysitter, hey, things are expensive these days. That why not just bring your kid down with you and you can all enjoy the fun. And we had plenty of things to do for the kids. So the vibe was just very different this year, and I believe it made it successful.
Yeah, I think it's Santa Clarita, right? It's Santa Clarita. That's what we're known for. It's families and children supporting children. Man, talk about
can't lose with that thing.
Cannot.
And I think you get more people when you have the kids that are able to show up because they don't have to get a babysitter, right?
Absolutely.
You get more participation. And that's like what the voice said. That's what Santa Clarita is about.
And kudos to you guys for stepping up in big ways. It's much needed in our community.
I stepped up.
Well, did you show up?
No, step up.
Okay, step up and show up.
Okay, but you said step. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. No, we're lucky. They're awesome.
Yeah. And honestly, we are lucky to have an assistant city manager in you, Frank, who is so involved.
Yeah.
I love that. So let's switch gears now. Let's talk about, you tell us a little about your background and where you grew up and what led your pursuit and career in public administration.
Well, it's a long journey. How much time do you have?
As long as you want.
Yeah.
It's your episode.
Yeah, that's right. I'll give it not the super long version, but I'll throw some city names out there to see if any of you guys know these places. I was born in Sanger, California.
Never heard of it.
Never heard of Sanger.
It's at the time a farm community, probably 5,000 people. It's probably 12 to 15,000 now is my guess.
Is it in California?
It's in California. It's in the Great Central Valley.
Is it off a paved road? Is there a paved road?
Barely.
You get there on a horse and buggy still?
Well, as my mom would joke, she would say, we drive by the old hospital I was born at, which is not even a hospital anymore. It's been converted. And she'd say, oh, yeah, that's the vet that delivered you. Oh, my God. So you've grown up in a rural town when your mom tells you that a vet delivered you. And so as soon as my dad started a business, he was a young man. There's a Sanger Boats. That's how some people might know Sanger. Okay. Its origin is in a small farm community in the Central Valley. They're now headquartered in Fresno, but Sanger Boats is one of the more prominent boat companies in the boating industry. And my dad worked there. He was a young man. And at one point he decided, I don't think I can do this back-breaking labor my whole life. I remember as a kid thinking that telling somebody that my dad only has an 8th grade education, I was almost embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
And then you grow up and you're like, my God, my dad did all this with an 8th grade education. And then you're impressed because it's like I have a master's degree and I'm not sure I could have pulled off what he did, all those years ago. And so he decided he'd start his own business. So he moved that business into Clovis. Then he moved the whole family to Clovis, which is probably 25, 30 minutes away from
I've heard of Clovis.
Sanger. Yeah, and Clovis is literally right next to Fresno. So
and Clovis is in California.
Well, they do have some vets there. So if you need any children to...
You don't have to skydive to get there.
And I went to Clovis High School. I ended up going to Fresno State. Went to the local community college.
Bulldog, right? Bulldog.
I'm a Bulldog. Matter of fact, another week I'll be watching them play Washington State in Bulldog Stadium. It's the first game that I'm taking my son to as a high schooler. So it'll be kind of fun. And people love when you grow up in the Fresno area or Central Valley, it feels more like the Midwest.
Yeah.
It's literally Bibles and guns and football. But it's a unique upbringing because it's a little bit more conservative than certainly here in Southern California.
Yeah.
But it's
like night and day. It should be separate states.
In some ways, I tell people it's like, I kid you not, when I was growing up, Wednesday was always youth night at the local churches. And Kiss was a popular band in the late 70s or in the 70s. They would have Kiss album burning events on Wednesday nights. And people say, no, that sounds like the 1950s.
Because of how conservative it was.
Because how conservative it was. Wow. Just to give you a flavor for what it's like growing up.
And that wasn't that long ago.
That was not that long ago. Okay. That was in the 70s and 80s. Wow. You still had some of that going on. So it's kind of a unique upbringing, but and I was always really interested in politics. The Fresno Bee, the local daily newspaper that these days newspapers aren't doing so well.
Ask what a newspaper was.
Yeah, exactly.
You're dating yourself.
I am dating myself for sure.
The Fresno Bee is a pretty big publication, though, right?
Yeah, they're a McClatchy newspaper. So you have the Sacramento Bee, the Modesto Bee, the Fresno Bee. And I was always reading the political section of the Fresno Bee, and I always had this interest in what was going on in public life, not unlike you guys. What's going on in the Santa Clarita Valley? It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
And so when I had the chance to, I finished at Fresno State with a degree in sociology, and I pursued a master's degree in public administration. I had an interest in maybe managing cities, maybe doing something at the state and the policy level. So I go to graduate school. I had an opportunity at the time, Governor Wilson. Now I'm going to start dating myself because I swear more and more people that we hire at the city, and I mention something about Governor Wilson, and they go, who? Yeah. So there's, in the 90s, there was a governor. His name was Pete Wilson. I actually left graduate school for a year, went to go to Sacramento to work for Pete Wilson. I worked in the Youth and Adult Correctional Agency. So I was doing policy work and working around the agency secretary. You know, California's set up like the federal system. We have the governor has a cabinet, and the cabinet oversees all the departments within the state. So I was fortunate enough to be a political appointee working in a cabinet office. And it was my first kind of foray into government. And then I realized I really needed to finish my master's degree, so I went back to Arizona. I ended up getting a job in the governor's office in Arizona, and did for the Office of Management and Budget. So I got some budget experience, and then I came out to the Los Angeles area, and I ended up getting a job with the city of Santa Clarita.
Wow.
As an analyst.
Yes, Ryan, he's very intelligent. His exams took a lot more than just 1 hour.
That was on another episode.
Are we going backwards?
How did you get, you mentioned you got with Pete Wilson. How did that evolve? Was it like you called, sent email? Like how did you get that opportunity?
It was kind of word of mouth. Somebody had mentioned something about getting an appointment in Sacramento, and so I went through the process and did a whole interview. And quite frankly, it was kind of a funny story. Is I was in the governor. If you've ever been to Sacramento, there's double doors that are protected by a CHP officer, and he or she lets people in and out of the governor's office, and they call it the horseshoe because the hallways are like a horseshoe.
They're renovating the Capitol right now. I was there earlier this year.
They're doing
and they moved everybody. It was weird to an entirely different building.
They demoed the whole back end of the whole Capitol to rebuild it. And so I went in, and his chief of his legal team was on this panel, and he asked me something about privatization. And I had been working on some of that stuff in Arizona that summer. I had worked at the Department of Corrections. I missed that part. But I worked at the Department of Corrections full time in that summer in Arizona, the first year I finished graduate school. And so I knew something about privatization of prisons because I got hired to do an evaluation of their first private prison in Arizona. And so I ended up, he asked me about it, and we started like debating almost in the interview process with the governor's chief of his legal team.
That's cool.
During your interview.
During my interview. And we were kind of going back and forth, and I got kind of lost in the interview, in the process.
Yeah.
And then I realized, oh wait, this is an interview. So I had to kind of back off. I walked out thinking, I'm not getting this job.
Yeah.
And I went back to Arizona, and sure enough, they called me and said, hey, we'd like to invite you to go work at the Youth Adult Correctional Agency. And so I ended up doing that for a year and went back to Arizona. And then I got interested in local government, and that's when I got hired in Santa Clarita. And then I started refocusing on city management specifically. Just because it seemed interesting. Part of it was when you're working as an appointee, everything's political based. So you're always working for somebody who's got elected into office, and you support that. But then there's the operational management side of state governments, local governments, and that interests me. I like the management side of things. Well, city management you get to do both because you get to work around elected officials, but you actually have to manage the operations that you're getting direction from the council. So you get kind of the best of both worlds, and that's really how I ended up where I'm at today.
Well, you're
he is very smart.
He's
sir.
an impressive individual from the moment we met. We were talking about before we went live. The first time we met, and I was fortunate that you were actually recognizing me Actually, had the privilege of you recognizing me for a small business Latino of the Year recognition through the chamber. But the first time we met was through local work as well at the time, which was not the Business Alliance, but it was the Santa Clarita Latino Business Chamber. Through Bill Miranda.
Now Councilman Bill Miranda.
Correct.
At the time, he was running the Latino Business Chamber.
So Bill is actually one of my mentors, and so I wanted to segue a little bit, and could you share us a little bit about your mentors and people who've influenced you and helped you, shape who you are and in your career path?
Sure. It's interesting because when I got the job in Santa Clarita, I met a gentleman by the name of John Danielson, and he was working in his
You didn't want to say my name?
Yeah, that's right. Well, there was Henry Rodriguez, and Henry has got me to the place right now. Well, that comes later. That comes later. Yeah, that comes later.
Yeah, that's right. I stole your thunder.
Are you funding campaigns right now? What's going on?
I think the kids call that glaze.
So you're guys are gonna be cracking up this whole time. There was an event going on, and Bill had asked me if I wanted to attend. I said absolutely, and that was the first time I met you.
Yep.
I met Paul De La Cerda. I think I met some folks.
Paulie D. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a few people that I got to meet, but the question was about mentors.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. I'm still back on the last question. So. Anyways, I'm working in Santa Clarita. There's a guy who's working. His title wasn't Assistant Director of Parks, Recreation, and Community Services, but he was kind of serving as Assistant Director. We just got along really well.
Okay.
Well, he went on and became a city manager. He went up to Nevada to Incline Village, actually, was his first management job. And we always stayed in contact. And then he ended up going to a newly incorporated city in Sacramento, city of Elk Grove. And he called me, and we had always just gotten along. We'd always emailed each other and had conversations. And he gave me a call and said, hey, would you be interested in coming to work for me as my assistant to the city manager, which is a separate position than assistant city manager? And I said, well, I don't know. What do you got going on? And he said, well, would you be willing to fly up here next week? I said, yeah, sure, why not? So I flew up to Sacramento. He introduced me to a couple of council members, and we started talking, and he ended up hiring me. Well, I'd known John from working before, and we had always shared stories and kind of backgrounds. It wasn't until I went to go work for him that kind of the mentoring, kind of the development process really started. And he had a huge influence on me. I think the first year I came in as the assistant too, and then he retitled me and gave me more responsibility. And in this case, I know we were having this conversation earlier about deputy city managers versus assistant city managers. So not to confuse you any further, but he made me the deputy city manager. Okay. And under that structure, there were two deputy city managers.
Now you're totally confusing Ryan. He has no idea.
I am right on. Deputy.
No.
Here I'm assistant.
He's confused.
He's our deputy.
Yeah, so there I was a deputy, here I was assistant. So if you want to call me deputy, that's fine. And so it really started the mentoring process. It really started my maturation as a manager. And I mean, I always joke with John and tell him, I'd say, John, you put me through like city manager boot camp.
Love that.
And the reason I say that is because Sacramento area, I mean, politics is like a blood sport there. Yeah. Everybody in Elk Grove, because it's a suburb of Sacramento, works in public affairs. They're lobbyists. Yep. They do everything in government. Politicians, Cruz Bustamante, there's names that from way back when. He lived in Elk Grove when he ran for governor at the same time that Schwarzenegger was running. So we had elected officials that lived in the city. We had politicians. We had lobbyists. So you can imagine what council meetings were like. Yeah. I mean, if you had an issue or an axe to grind with the council, you didn't just come up and say, hey, I don't like what you're doing over there. Man, these were sophisticated lobbyists that could literally break down the issue and say, this is where you're wrong. Yeah. And the council would, oh, geez, I think he may be right. Right. So that was the environment I grew up in. So it was really tough to manage in that environment. But I'll tell you, John taught me how to maintain your composure under increased politics and stress. And
probably made you stronger, right? Going through those tough times. How did you get anything done when there's so many lobbyists and so many different opinions and?
Oh, that's a whole other topic, right?
That might be another topic.
I guess more, how did you manage them, right? Or manage expectations?
It's like anything else. Yeah. My dad was in business for 45 years, and he would always say, things like, if you know where you want to go, pin it in a map, and now you have a direction. And it's just you don't stop on the first obstacle. Yeah. You just keep going until that bridge gets built, or that bike park gets built, or that sheriff's station gets built. I'll tell you, you could literally sit with Ken and the project managers who built the sheriff's station here locally, and if you really want to know the details, what most people see is the dirt being dug up,
Yeah.
the groundbreaking,
Right.
and then the ribbon being cut. Everything in between there is
All the real work.
all the real work is
right.
messy. It's messy, but you never stop. You just keep pushing forward, and that was really one of the big lessons that John taught me is that he had a vision for where he wanted to take the city from a management standpoint, and the council set the direction. And I mean, that's a whole separate podcast. We had, just like here, we had a sheriff's contract for our police services. We converted that completely into a municipal police department. And we did it. It took a couple of years. But I'll tell you, there were all kinds of things and obstacles trying to get that done.
Yeah, easier said than done.
It was being done at the time, just a small little snippet. It was being done when we still had all the troops in Iraq.
Oh, wow.
We had trouble buying munitions.
Wow.
We had to set up an armory for the police officers, and we couldn't even buy bullets because they were all being shipped overseas. And so we had to, so you know what you do? Strangely, you just start picking up the phone. Do you have something for 9mm? Do you have this? Do you have
from other cities?
Other cities, other
private sector.
You find every munitions manufacturer, and you just pick up the phone and you start cold calling and seeing if they have munitions. And some of them would have defense contracts, and they're like, "Hey, we're tied up for the next 5 years." Others like, "Well, we do have some surplus. What do you need?" And we buy a little here, buy a little there. So there was just things like that. It gets messy, but you can't stop.
Yeah.
You can't stop.
I love that insight. That is awesome. No, just how the city works, and it's like just those little details. People don't think about that.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that people behind the scenes.
There's so much behind the scenes that goes into running a city.
Yeah.
Right. I'm gonna take you back a little. One of the first times I heard you speak, and you shared your stories, and you're a powerful speaker. You shared, and please fill in where I'm gonna miss. I'm not sure if it was your mom or your dad who would go to like council meetings. Oh. And the ironic part that now you're basically running them. Can you share that story that when I heard you, because you were one of our keynotes at the time, you shared that story and I loved it. So I would love for you to share that with our viewers.
So the little town of Sanger, my mom was a graduate of Sanger High School, and both of my grandparents, well, my parents are from Mexico as well. My grandfather never spoke English the whole time he lived in the United States, and so that's the kind of the setting the stage for.
Yes.
My mom had an assignment where she had to go down to a city council meeting.
That's what it was. Yes.
And she told my grandfather, hey, I need to go down to a city council meeting, and he's like, well, what do you don't have any business down there. And you have to imagine this is, the late 50s, early 60s, Central California. Yeah. A lot of strange things were still happening at that time, race relations and otherwise. Yeah. And so my grandfather just said, well, no, he didn't believe her, quite frankly. The Mexican culture can be very conservative. Fathers really protect their daughters. Yes. So he thought perhaps at one point she was maybe going to go meet a boy, clandestinely at a city council meeting. But so he said, I will drive you down there. So he asked her, say, well, what do you have business here? We don't, what he was making reference to was that the Mexican community doesn't have any business with the white community, and at that time, and at that time in the late 50s, early 60s, that was true. Yeah. You didn't see Latinos going to council meetings and advocating for themselves or their community. And so he didn't really understand why she would do this, but it was a class assignment. So he said, okay, but I'll be right here. So she goes in, she comes out of the meeting and tells her, my grandfather, this is what I did. And he says, okay, well, he kind of was a bit suspect, but she turned in her assignment. And I always tell that story because what you flash forward, this was my teenage mother. You flash forward and she raised kids that all went to college. I have a master's degree. My brother's got a law degree. My sister was a human resources director for a city up in the Bay Area for many years. And I sit every other Tuesday, I sit in meetings and I help Ken, as the assistant city manager, help him review every agenda report that goes to the council. We do all the post-agenda items. So if anything comes out of the council meetings that the council needs, I follow up that get those assignments out, follow up on them. I am steeped in city government now, and I think it's just to show how much progress is made in one generation. One generation.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, I love that you share that story because that just makes me proud of you and proud of like our culture. One generation can make that kind of an impact. You're running a city.
Yeah, and it's and here we are. 2 weeks ago, I just dropped my daughter at UC Santa Barbara for her fresh start, her freshman year in college. And she works so hard in high school. She's a graduate of Valencia High School. And I just think, wow, we're making progress.
Yeah.
We're making
and
progress.
we continue to do so.
And we continue to do so.
I
And,
love that.
and that story is really just in a long line that I hope to be, my daughter will have her own story.
Yeah.
And her kids will have their own story. And we'll continue to advance and create communities that everybody's happy and fulfilled to live in. So,
Like you said, keep moving forward.
keep moving
Right?
forward. You
Don't
can't
stop.
stall.
Yeah.
Did you have a lot of obstacles being a Latino man in that government environment earlier in your career, just starting off? Or?
It's interesting because my initial response would be no. Not to say that if there was something out there that I didn't recognize it, I don't know. But I'll give you one little example of when you set your goal on something. The ethnicity and race, like I don't know how much of that plays into it. It plays into it because it's who I am. It's. But when I took my first city manager job in the city of Wildomar, it was a small city that just incorporated in Riverside County. The Daily newspaper out there. Again, newspapers are. That's another topic.
They're just online now.
Yeah, they're online. The major daily in Riverside is the Press Enterprise, and so the Press Enterprise reporter. Called me and said, "Hey, I'd like to do a story about you as the new city manager of this newly incorporated city." So I went and had lunch with him at a Mexican restaurant, interesting enough. And the first question out of his mouth was, "So, what does it feel like to be the first Latino city manager in Southwest Riverside County?" And I looked at him very matter of fact, and I said, "To be honest with you, I hadn't even thought about it. I was more focused on becoming a city manager."
Right. Yeah.
And to this day, and you want some controversy? I'll give you a little controversy. To this day, I'm adamant about it, and it's just my own little picadillo.
Sure.
Is that our international organization, the International City County Manager Association, has a division, if you will, that as part of your membership you can join certain groups, and one of them is the Latino city managers. And to this day, I still refuse to join it. And it's not because I don't like the individuals. Yeah. It's because it's just a personal thing. I want to be known as the best city manager.
Right.
You're bigger than that.
Right. That happens to be Latino.
That happens to be Latino.
But
other than that, I just want to be known as a good manager.
Yeah.
And if somebody says, "Hey, that's great," and how does your background help you? Well, that's a different conversation.
Right.
Because I can tell you, I think the Latino culture, Mexican culture specifically, is very warm and embracing. Like Mexican fighters, we just kind of have a toughness about us.
For sure.
Work
really hard.
Yeah.
Don't give up.
And Henry can hopefully attest to this. The one thing, and it was funny, I was having coffee with somebody this morning, and this topic came up about what it was like growing up in the 70s. And my parents are both from Mexico. When they came to the United States, if you weren't working, you weren't putting food on the table.
Right.
And so imagine, they started raising us in a little bit more suburban environment. And so, when little Frankie would get sick, I'd say, maybe it's an opportunity to watch some cartoons this morning. And, no, not in my household.
Nope.
My parents made me get up, and they said, hey, once you get in the shower, you go to school, you'll start feeling a little better. You'll be fine.
I had perfect attendance through elementary school,
Really?
high school. Not going to school was not an option.
Yeah.
Not an option in my household. Love that. Hey, voice, I'm going to bring you back in. Roll you back in.
Yes, sir.
Are you still an honest man right now?
I love listening
I love
to
hearing
him
him talk.
Yes.
Maybe, I know you always have questions for us. Fire them.
Well, yes. I wanted to ask you what would be a guilty pleasure of yours?
A guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Oh, man. Well, food is always going to...
Yeah.
And not to keep the Latino theme going, but it's
You got to dive into it. You can't just say food.
A guilty pleasure. And it's horrible. Now that I'm getting older, I go to the doctor and they say, "Oh, you got to cut back on this and cut back on that." I love Mexican. I love good Mexican food.
Yeah.
I mean, I will drive an hour somewhere if somebody tells me about a good Mexican restaurant, I'm there. I will find it on a weekend. There's a place and I'll can I put a plug for something?
Please.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what is your...
There, if you like mariscos.
Oh,
yeah.
And he's
nice speaking my language.
Yeah. And this guy is getting a ton of press right now.
Okay.
And you might have even heard about him. He's near downtown area, near USC. It's the name of the place is called Holbox.
Okay.
And it's spelled just like that, Holbox.
Okay.
And he's been featured in the LA Times. He was Michelin recognized a couple of years ago. He got his first Michelin star this year.
Nice.
Wow.
And so if you or your listeners, you guys want to have like arguably the best mariscos
Okay.
that you've ever had.
Michelin star rated
Michelin star-
mariscos restaurant?
And what's interesting, it's done in a little bit like what you would find in the mercados like in Mexico,
Yeah.
where it's not a restaurant per se, it's a counter.
Okay.
And there's multiple counters for different types of food. And so you order it, and you literally, this is Michelin rated, and then you go sit down and just put your number up, and they bring you the food.
Wow.
Or they do have a bar where they have all their refrigerators where the fish are at, and you can watch them prep the food right in front of you. I mean, it's not only a good
incredible.
experience visually to sit there and watch it all, but the food is phenomenally good. Wow. So there's my guilty pleasure.
Food.
I can see it.
You got
I
me
can see
hungry.
it in your
I
passion
know,
in your eyes.
it's right around noontime, so I know you guys are probably thinking, okay, well, I think we got a trip to downtown LA coming soon. So.
What about flan? Do you like flan?
Oh, Ryan is flan. Ryan.
Well, I hate to disappoint you, but I'm probably the one Mexican that doesn't like flan.
My 1/8 Latino
Yes,
loves flan. It loves
Anywhere
flan.
we go to this restaurant,
is that your-
and
that's
they
what
have
you like?
flan,
I
Ryan's getting it.
I have an ongoing thing with them. Every Mexican restaurant we go to, I always order flan.
No
We're on,
matter
like,
what.
We're on like 300 in a row. Yeah.
Oh, Ryan. All right, Frank. How does your role as assistant city manager differ from your previous positions, and what unique challenges does it bring?
You know, the assistant role is interesting because the way, for your listeners to kind of break it up. So, and I don't think a lot of people know this part of it, is that a local government, the model for most local governments across the country is actually the corporate model. What you have is the council serves as the equivalent of like your board of directors. Yep. And then the board of directors, and you can even get some variations, just like private companies. Sometimes the board chair is also the CEO. Mm-hmm. So there are some cities where the mayor actually runs a city. Like the big cities in Los Angeles are like that. The mayor gets elected to Los Angeles, but they actually have an administrator that helps them do that because they've never run cities before.
Yeah. Sure.
In our case, we operate with the council manager form of government. So we're more of the board of directors hires the CEO, and in this case, it's the city manager Ken Striplin.
Got it.
So my job, and I describe it this way because most people work in the private sector, is that I'm a little bit like a chief operating officer. And mix in there a little vice president of this, that, or the other. And so Ken really works, the city manager really works directly with the elected officials. He's working with them on policy and what their objectives are. When they got elected, they made promises that they wanted to see the city operate a certain way. And so once that direction comes down through the form of a vote on some policy, that's where we go in. So Ken makes sure that he gets that all sorted out, and then it gets pushed into the organization to some department that's responsible for building something or whatever the case may be. My job is to be between the city manager and the directors to make sure that there's a link there that everything that he has been directed to do gets done.
Got it.
And so,
no pressure.
No pressure.
No pressure.
And and it's interesting because we had a communications manager years ago that was sitting in my office one day, and she says, if you know the name Gail Morgan, any of you guys remember her? Gail was before Carrie.
Okay. I do know Carrie.
Carrie Lujan, who is our current communications manager, and Gail was sitting in my office one day. And if you look at documents, if you were a historian and you look back at this time that Ken and I have served in our tenure, my name is on virtually every document. Wow. I sign almost every contract. I sign thousands of contracts a year for the city. And small things for a fence replacement that's $1,200 all the way to a $35 million bridge. And she was articulating all these things. Oh, well, there's this, and you got responsibility for that, and you got do you ever lose sleep at night? And I was like,
casually like that.
Just I go, well, now I'm going to, because you don't kind of on the same premise. I don't really think about it.
Yeah.
I'm just doing, and I'm signing contracts. I'm looking at reports, and I'm saying, nah, that's not the way I think it should be worded. You should rewrite it this way, and this is the council's going to probably ask this, so let's make sure you have an answer for that. I'm just in a go mode. I'm just going.
Yeah.
But then you stop and you think, oh yeah, that's a lot of stuff I'm responsible for. And it's a little scary because a lot of the financial documents all have my name on it. So they know exactly who to ask if something goes wrong. So it's a little, scary at times, but, I've been doing this long enough that I feel comfortable on a daily basis. So that's kind of the role. So and if something's not going exactly the way the city manager would like it, well, I'm the first person he's talking to.
Got it.
And
I was going to ask you that. How does that look like if there's something different or a change? Do you bring it up to the city manager or you bring it up to the council?
Yeah, well, I don't work directly with the council. So if there's something going wrong or needs to be adjusted or course correction, I go directly to Ken. And it's oftentimes with the director so that we're both saying, hey, here's the problem, or here's the problem. And, as you guys probably know, you don't show up to the CEO's office without any solutions.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You don't say, so what do you want us to do? Right. It's like, well, then his next question is, what am I paying you to do?
Right.
That?
Yeah. Right.
So, there's the problem. Here's a solution. Sometimes the directors will come to me with their solutions.
Yeah.
To vet them a little bit before they go to Ken.
Right.
They just want to see, what do you think his reaction is going to be? And there's been times when I've said, I don't think you want to show that one.
Right.
And other times I'll say, no, I think that's kind of within the realm that, and I give them that insight to Ken, and then we'll go back in and I'll let the directors make their pitch. And if Ken looks at me like, is this the real thing? And, I can change the fortunes of some of these projects by going, yes or no.
Right.
But typically we come with solutions. He buys one of the solutions or tweaks a solution that he's more comfortable with, and then we go forward. We just keep moving.
Keep moving.
How lucky is Ken? I was going to say he does a great job, but to have him right on your side or just in your corner.
We have a great team.
Yeah, I agree. We say that all the time.
Running the city. It's unbelievable. It's but it sounds like the voice. You want to chime back in?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Is that okay? I just got excited. Well, once you started talking about your signatures and on all these projects, we have a big project going on at Central Park through the stairs. I think it's like $1 million of lights. And
yes.
What is that? What does all that look like? What does that entail? Can you give us any insight? My stairs communities would be happy to.
Well, I think it serves two things. One is aesthetics. And the other one, it provides a little bit of lighting, guiding people to the stairs.
Sure.
But the aesthetics, I think, is going to be the cool thing about it. At night, we have so many people, with the expansion of fields, we have, we're a family-oriented community. So we have so many of our families out there. Whether it's concerts in the park, you're going to see those lights come down. And,
you're going to be able to see the rattlesnakes.
You'll be able to see the rattlesnakes.
But look the coyotes in the eye.
Exactly.
And I believe there was going to be a statue or something that's in that big rounded
area.
There's
going to be
hopefully
art.
Not of the voice. Not of him, right?
What's the statue? Can you disclose that? Or
you'll see when it gets
okay. We almost got into the lead exclusive. Almost.
And is the lights, I was going to say, is it all of Central Park or just the isolated
Just
area?
the isolated, the concourse area that leads right up to the stairs.
The newer area.
The newer
super
area.
Nice.
Yeah.
Can you talk about just the budgeting? Because I think most people will just say, well, why don't they just put lights? Not understanding the infrastructure, the cost, maintenance. Can you talk about that? Because if you just go, you would just say, well, why doesn't the city, not allocate some funds and put lights here? But talk about all the expenses and all the intricacies that go into just putting in lights.
Yeah, it's interesting because we, in recreation, people all the time, hey, why can't you just put some grass on the field?
Why can't you just?
and what they don't realize is that there's a lot of technology in our fields, and there's a lot of science that goes behind. Our park staff are some of the best. We send them to these academies where they learn which grains of seed they need to use for the best possible experience on that grass. We laser level softball fields. Not a lot of cities do that, but we were willing to spend the money. Laser level. This is next level kind of stuff. Yes.
Get those perfect hops.
yeah, that's right. And so our playing fields, the irrigation systems are not just your 19. Well, the year when I was growing up in the 70s.
Sprinklers.
Little sprinklers. I remember my dad would make sure
Yeah.
15 minutes each station.
Yeah.
All that stuff is digital. It's all electronic. There's so much technology that goes into building our parks now.
Right.
And when those grass fields are installed, you have to get those things level so that they don't have pits in them, because we have a lot of tournaments out here. We have a lot of
it's huge.
High school teams, club teams. We produce a ton of athletes out here. And so it has always been and if you talk to anybody that at the time of incorporation, sports, activities, and recreation for family has always been the kind of the foundation of a lot of the work that the city does. And so when you build a park, it's not just putting grass seed out there. It's building the restrooms and you got to get plumbing into everything. We got to get the electrical. Can you expand it? There are things that the families and the clubs will need when they're there. So we're always thinking of all these things, and there's a lot of science behind laying a field out. And then there's maintenance costs associated with it. And because our fields get used so often, we have to rotate them out. Those of you that use the fields out there, sometimes some parts of the year they're closed, and then we reopen them up when the grass seed sprouts, and then you can get back people on the field. There's a science to all of that, and we have some of the. I don't say this lightly, but we have some of the best park staff and management and supervision out there.
And commissioners.
And commissioners.
And
realtors.
He was going to get there.
I was going to get there, but and our commission.
And realtors.
He needed a little nudge.
Well, honestly, it's funny you say that, Ryan, because hold on, because I know you guys are in a lot of what you do is working in the real estate industry. But I'll tell you, we think about those things.
Yeah.
Because our partnerships with the private sector are very strong. And what I mean by that, and specifically in the real estate world, we want to build a community and maintain a community that people want to live in.
Yeah.
So that when somebody comes out here, here's a little anecdote.
Makes your job a lot easier.
For sure.
You're welcome.
I don't have to sell the city. It sells itself. For
Well,
sure.
it's interesting because one of the things that Ken has done this for years, and I think it's a great thing. Anytime we hire new employees, at least once a month, we invite the employees into a conference room, and it's to meet we literally call it meet the city manager. We don't want new employees to never meet the executives of the organization. We want it to be a big family.
Wow,
so everybody knows.
Wrecking.
Yeah.
You go straight to Ken.
Yeah, that's right. You go straight there, right on the outset. Well, and part of it is to remind people that hey, we're human just like you. We obviously have important job making sure all this stuff gets done, but we're just like you. And it's interesting. One of the things that we hear regular is people say, oh, especially if they had to relocate. They said, oh, in one case, I know one of our staff members relocated from Florida because she worked for Disney and her husband worked for Disney. And so they were going to move to Burbank because that's where the Disney operations are at. And literally Disney employees, this is an anecdote, but she told us directly, she goes, Disney employees said, now you know where you really want to move to? Santa Clarita.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And that story has been replicated over and over and over. People want to live here. It's not because, in some communities, it's like, well, this is what we could afford.
Yeah. Right.
And that's fine too. Right. I get it. People have, that I respect that. But when it comes to, hey, we have a little bit of money and we want to go to a place that we want to raise kids and have a good experience.
Quality of life.
Quality of life.
Yeah.
And I know you had Ken on one of your podcasts. Yeah. And I don't know if you mentioned
small time stuff.
At
Frank Oviedo here.
But we talk about quality of life all the time.
And I love that you guys do that because that's why the three of us are living in Santa Clarita. Like people ask me all the time, why do you live? Why do you still live here? I'm like, why wouldn't I? Have you guys not experienced Santa Clarita? You guys are creating that experience.
Well, I'll tell you, kind of on that note, I got all these little anecdotes. I'll keep going. But
we have as much time as you want.
I had years ago. I was going to speak to a real estate group, and I got some notes, and they were asking similar questions about the amenities of the city, and why would somebody want to move here? And my daughter was still in elementary school at the time, and I said, well, let me give you an example. I said my daughter goes to West Creek Academy. And they have the Saugus School District has a partnership with Cal Arts. Cal Arts is the Juilliard of the West. They are world recognized
yes, they are.
And
a lot of people don't know that.
I know.
It's in our backyard.
It's literally in our backyard. Yeah. And every year they put out a press release for how many Emmys they've won, how many Grammys they've won, how many Oscars they've won.
It's significant.
Their graduates go on and are leading the entertainment business. Our local Saugus School District has a partnership with them. My daughter was playing violin, and they sent one of their students in the music department to write an original piece for West Creek Elementary Orchestra and perform it. And they would practice it all year and perform it for the parents at the end of the school year.
Wow.
With the real estate agents in the room, I said, where else are you going to find that?
Nowhere.
You're just not going to find it. And you can see that, you can take Chinese lessons in elementary schools here. Right. There's so much. My son's a runner. And we got him involved in, baseball at first, and then he showed that he had some running skill. And all of a sudden, people said, oh, well, there's multiple running clubs here in town if you want to join one of them. So we ended up joining the Storm. There's my plug for the Storm. And in cross country, we went to nationals every year. And I got to meet parents like you guys hanging out in Tallahassee, in Greensboro, in Madison, Wisconsin. And I've been all over the country with this club that has a national reputation.
Yep. Wow.
A national reputation.
Right out of Santa Clarita.
And right here in little old Santa Clarita, we're producing athletes
again.
at the national level on a regular basis.
And there's stories upon stories upon stories just like this, and that's what makes our city so unique.
Absolutely.
You know?
And we support each other. Small
100%.
businesses are huge.
Hey, you know, one of my favorite things to do, and I know your son plays baseball, Henry, and I saw some of the posts. He just won a big championship of something. And one of my favorite things is when our clubs win national, state titles, we bring them to the council meetings.
Yes, you guys do.
And we, our mayor and the council, they celebrate our children out here.
Yeah.
And let them know, you know, and I know this can get a little into the touchy-feely, but we collectively are one big family.
Yeah.
Our council tells the whole world and anybody that's willing to listen, our kids are special.
Yeah.
And then we recognize them, and those kids will remember those things the rest of their lives. They'll go. Some of them have gone on to college. Here's a quick anecdote. I was picking up, and don't ask me the name, but I was picking up my dry cleaning yesterday, and the woman that was there, she used to work there more on a full-time basis, and I hadn't seen her for a while, and she's like, Frank. And so I was like, I had forgotten her. So I was like, I thought, are you my cousin? And I don't know. And she goes, remember I used to work here and you would drop your stuff off? I go, oh, that's right. And I go, oh, how are things? I says, how's your family? She said, my son, he's doing really well. He's in Spain. I said, oh, well, you know, I'm thinking, what's he doing in Spain? Yeah. She says, he played 1 year, and I'm going to have to get his name because maybe if I get it, you can have him on a podcast.
Yeah.
He's visiting. He played 1 year at Saugus in soccer, and he had all his clubs. He was identified. I'm not a big soccer fan. Madrid Real.
Yeah. No, that's huge.
He plays for Madrid Real.
He was hand selected to be on their academy teams. He's the team captain.
Wow.
He grew up right here in Santa Clarita.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
I know. It's Jacob's good friend's older brother.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so she was showing me pictures of him in Spain, and I said, have you visited? She goes, I'm going to go in March to go watch him play. That's Santa Clarita.
Yeah.
That is so
Santa Clarita.
No, that's awesome. And how many other athletes have come from here?
There's
And that
so many.
continue
There's so
to come
many.
back.
And it's great for the families because we raise our kids. We want them to go and get involved in positive things, and there's plenty of positive things for them to sports and academics, and that's what I love about it's just a great community to and I have the privilege of actually making decisions that impact that.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to be building a rink over at the sports complex.
I'm excited about that actually.
Are you a big roller skater?
No,
Roller skating Diddy.
We could have our podcast every for opening day or
Let me
something.
get sponsored by the SCV.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I was gonna ask,
Frank, I think you guys are on to something.
Frank, a few more questions and then we'll wrap this up because we can go on forever, brother. What are some long-term goals you have for the city of Santa Clarita, and how do you see the city evolving over the next few years?
That's a really good question because we are really in the throes of that question right now.
Okay, good.
One of the things that is happening is everybody that helped, and I'll give you a little timeline, everybody that helped incorporate the city in 1987, well, they're getting up there in age, and they have done a phenomenal job. All the founders of the city and all the early businesses that were working with the city to make what we have today, they're slowly aging out and starting to hand those reins over to the next generation. Well, Ken and I would argue, we're kind of in that next generation. Well, Ken and I are even getting to that point. We're both in our 50s now. We are starting to think more about retirement than we are about the beginning of our careers. We still bring, our full game every day to the office, but we also recognize that we can't do this forever, and we're not going to be able to do this forever. And so the big question is, what is Santa Clarita going to see and how are we going to evolve in the next 10 years. And so we're actively in the process of getting or identifying talent internally within the organization to potentially move that talent into executive management so that we can continue doing what we're doing at the city government level to make sure that we make good on the promise of quality of life. So that question's important because in December, as an executive team, we're going to go have a retreat. And we're going to be starting to articulate what that looks like in the future. Because I always tell Ken all the time that under his tenure, what we've seen is massive growth.
Massive.
Yeah, massive.
And
success. Huge success.
And growth, not necessarily, some people say, yeah, I don't like the traffic. But what I mean by growth.
Most people say that.
Yeah, most people say that. But what I mean by growth is we took over a very successful and continue to make successful ice skating facility. Yes. We built a sheriff's station. Yeah. We built the Canyon Country Community Center. We're about to build the rink. I want to see you in your disco roller skates. And this afternoon, Ken and I are going to go tour for the first time, because we're going to open it in the next month or so, the Valencia Community Center. It's the old YMCA that's been completely
That opens
rehabbed.
up soon?
It's going to be opening up in the next couple of months.
Actually toured it at the opportunity tour a few months back.
Right. The commission toured it before I did.
Oh, wow.
Some perks.
No exclusive access here.
Commissioner.
So we're excited about that. We've put a lot of infrastructure in place in anticipation of future development, future families coming and living here, and making sure that we maintain our family-oriented reputation. So that's what we've done in our tenure. So the question is, we got to get the right people in place, and then identify the right projects to push the city forward. Yeah. Because the minute we stop talking about the future is the day that we become a city like everybody else.
And we don't want to.
And we don't want to. We don't want to do
it.
You're
so forward thinking, and I love that. And I love that you're sharing that vision with our viewers. So thank you for that. Last questions, and then we'll wrap this up. How can the residents of the city of Santa Clarita engage with you, your team, or council, or even just simply support city initiatives?
The other thing I like to tell residents all the time about when that question gets asked is we don't have eyes on every corner of the city.
Wait, you don't?
And a lot of times issues that arise, whether it's landscape, and a lot of it's the quality of life issues, right? It's the aesthetics of the community, it's the graffiti, it's the landscaping that's been allowed to just kind of weed overgrowth, all those kind of things, roads that are maybe somebody hadn't spotted that pothole. Where residents can help us the most, and they do, and I love it. We have an app that you can literally, it geolocates you, and you can fill in the information on what the issue is, whether it's a broken sidewalk or a tree that's.
I didn't even know this. There's a whole app.
We should probably not disclose the app. It's gonna blow up.
Well, honestly,
tomorrow's gonna go.
Well, you guys can show it. You can just look up City of Santa Clarita in your app store, and it'll pop up, and it has fields that you fill in, and it geolocates you, and you just fill in, and it gives you drop down windows so you can just pick graffiti or some of the basic. But if it's unique, you can type in what it is. We get those all day, every day, nonstop. Yeah. Those are constantly be assigned to departments so that there's very little lag time. If there is graffiti, our goal is to have it gone before you're driving home from your commute from LA. Exactly.
Yes, I love that.
And so it's those type of things that help us maintain the city looking the way it does. And then if you want to take it to the next level, well, you can always come to a council meeting, or we have lots of volunteer opportunities, as being on the Parks and Rec Commission. And we like our. There's nothing. Some cities don't want anybody involved in anything. Just don't look at the books too close. We're full transparency because we can't get better if we don't know what we're not doing right. That's why we're not afraid. And some cities would be afraid of doing this. Every 2 years, we put a survey out there and we expose ourselves to every resident and say, what are we doing well? What are we not doing well? What would you like to see in the future? What do you want to see less of in the future? And we get all that information, and it plays into how we build our strategic plans. That's why our strategic plans match what the community is already wanting and already seeing. You never see us just go out there in left field, because we want to make sure that we're matching what the community wants. And then when the council understands those dynamics, and so they are, we can't do anything. And I'll just put my plug in for the council. It's like they are the policy setters. The trails, the roads, the parks, all that pace is set by the council. They hire the Ken Striplins and the Frank Oviedos of the world to keep pace and make sure. If I assure you, because I've worked in other cities, when that pace isn't kept, the chief gets a nice invite to find another job. And so we keep pace, and quite frankly, residents like yourselves, you expect that pace, and we try to deliver on that every day.
That is some serious.
I'm speechless.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, it's tremendous insight to how this city operates and works. I have $1 million question that I asked Ken. Castaic, You don't have to answer that. I'll give you a hard time. But
Did Ken answer the question?
He ignored him.
you know,
But the level of accountability that you explained,
Yeah.
I think that's another uniqueness of our city, right?
Yeah. You should never be afraid, public or private for that matter, because your customers, all the private companies in this community are our customers.
Yep.
And they have a level of expectation. It's why sadly government gets a bad rap because there's a lot of places that don't operate that way.
Right.
We're not afraid to ask, what are we doing wrong?
I love that.
What are we doing great so we can do more of that?
Is there a fear of pace being too much, too fast, too quick?
At times.
Especially in today's environment, right?
Well, and even like you joke about Castaic, but it's like we want to make sure we have a city that we can properly take care of. Taking on a huge area like that, it changes the dynamic.
Perspective.
We have a real sweet spot with the population being in the 230 range, and we've had these internal conversations about whether if we because people have asked about Stevenson Ranch as well.
That's another one,
and that's another one, and we've done some internal exercises, but never gone any further than that.
Yeah. So for now, you're LA County.
Yeah,
fine.
for now,
that's right. I'm in Valencia.
But
we're fine.
but
We're fine.
honestly, the good thing is
We moved.
with Catherine Barger's office, we have a tight relationship. So we plan the valley together. So when we talk about the valley, oftentimes we're talking. We're not talking about the city and the county. We're just it's one valley, and so we know that what we do affects the county. What the county does affects us. So we're always trying to coordinate our efforts. Matter of fact, at least once a month we do meet with Catherine's office. Stephanie English, her deputy out here. Going back to the deputy thing.
I always get this question, and you guys probably do maybe. Like the city of Santa Clarita, some people think like there's a city of Santa Clarita, but then there's individual cities of Santa Clarita, like Valencia, Cannon Country, Saugus. How do you explain that to people? Like I say Santa Clarita is the whole,
right?
And then you have different cities within Santa
they're
Clarita.
Communities.
Right?
They're communities.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, having grown up in the Fresno area, we didn't have that. And so it was unique to me when I first moved to Los Angeles.
All Fresno?
Well, yeah, it's all Fresno.
Okay.
It's all Fresno. It's all Clovis.
Okay.
And when I moved to Los Angeles, it was weird.
Oh, the little community, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, Westwood's not a city?
Yeah.
It's like, no, that's a community. Oh, so Brentwood's a city. No, that's a community as well. Venice? No, that's just an area of Los Angeles. And so it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
They have independent histories. Like Newhall, one of the oldest areas of the city, has its own history. Saugus has its own history. And so when it incorporated, it actually was the largest incorporation. There's a little factoid for your listeners and viewers.
I like this, actually.
It was the largest incorporation in the state of California's history.
In the history.
Wow.
Hey.
So you had 4 communities.
You should kind of
That's a
know
Facebook
this. You're in
post
real
right
estate.
there, huh?
There you go.
Yeah, that's a good one, actually. The largest
It was the largest incorporation in the state of California's history.
Wow.
So it incorporated Canyon Country, Saugus, Newhall, and Valencia, the master plan community of Valencia.
And they just forgot about Castaic.
We'll deal with that later. We'll deal with that later. You don't want Castaic anyways right now. There's a lot going on.
Well, Frank, brother, thank you so much for being on our
it's my
podcast,
pleasure.
man. It was an absolute pleasure.
I mean, I'm speechless. I mean, to get the insight from him
at this level,
I mean, it's incredible. So we appreciate you and
Diddy,
amazing episode.
Sign us off, dude.
With the voice,
H-Rod,
SCV MVP.
Your exclusive Elite X podcast, and we're out.